detox is going to add stress to the system, right? So when you think of a traditional detox, you're taking a toxic element from tissue and you're mobilizing it and you're bringing it into the body's processing center. And then the body has to deal with that. If your body was at max capacity in the processing center, let's say that cup was full, and now you've added more toxicity through a traditional detox agent, now your cup has overflowed and you're getting symptoms. And these detox reactions are signs from the body that there's more active, processed circulating toxicity than what your body is comfortable with dealing with. So that is what the detox reaction is telling you.
Hi, and welcome to the Lyme Bites podcast, where we shine a light on the misunderstood science of Lyme and other vector-borne diseases, as well as the truths that many still miss. I'm Dr. Mariah Hinchy, naturopathic physician and fellow of the Medical Academy of Pediatric Special Needs. I specialize in treating chronic Lyme disease as well as other complex inflammatory conditions. In this podcast, we break down what's working and what's not. We share the facts that most people miss, we challenge outdated thinking, and we give both patients and practitioners the tools to heal smarter. So let's get into it and change the way we heal Lyme. Hi, and welcome back to another edition of the Lyme Bites podcast. This is your host, Dr. Mariah Hinchy, and today we're going to be talking about the importance of detox and the role of binders when it comes to detoxification. And joining me today is Jeff Hoyt. He is the owner and founder of Zeolite Labs. Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for being here with us today.
Absolutely happy to be here.
Great. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with Zeolite?
Sure. So I've kind of been on my own personal health journey for about 15 years now. Really, it started before that, really at birth. I mean, traumatic birth experience, antibiotics from age like 0 to 5, and a lot of gut issues and kind of set up for not the best success with health, but got into kind of functional medicine, functional nutrition around just after high school. And just kind of got into that industry, worked for a food sensitivity lab, got into supplements, got into biohacking, opened up a biohacking center. So I've dabbled with a lot of the different technologies and supplements out there. And I got into Zeolite when I recognized the need for detox, because at the biohacking center, there was all this great equipment, oxygen therapy, hydrogen, all these things, PEMF, et cetera. And they were helping kind of prop people up, but they would have to keep coming in to get the benefits. When they stopped using the technology, they reverted back to their baseline of symptoms. So I said, okay, what is it? We need to do something that's removing the root cause of these issues so that they can stop doing it and continue feeling better. And that's when I said, all right, detox is kind of the missing link. And I was utilizing infrared sauna and humic and fulvics and some binders and chelators and all sorts of things. And I thought those were effective detox methods, but I was finding that those weren't really getting the job done. And then I discovered Zeolite and I started utilizing that, and people were getting better results than a lot of the other things. And that's where the last 5-6 years, I've just dedicated my professional career to, diving into Zeolite, manufacturing what I believe is the best Zeolite product on the market, and then providing education for people and how to use it most effectively to get the results they're looking for.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing all of that with us. So let's take, many, many steps back, and let's just talk about why is detox even important for those of our listeners that don't know this yet? Why are we so toxic?
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, what I always say is if you live in the 21st century, you have to detox, right? It's more important now because there's a higher level of environmental toxicants that we're exposed to, and the body is just under more stress in general. So it's harder to process the toxicity coming in, right? So really the two things we're considering is one, how well is our body processing toxicity? And two, what is the level of toxicity that we're faced with on a daily basis, right? And the formula for success or for health in terms of toxicity is if all the toxic stuff coming in on a daily basis, if our body is able to deal with it and effectively remove it without accumulating it and causing too many issues, that's great. But some people are so overburdened with other stressors and toxic stressors that when these toxic elements are coming in, the body can't deal with them all. And the body then puts some of them into storage and we start accumulating toxicity over time. And that can be quite problematic, right? So I think one of the issues is external sources, right? We have more toxicity in our environment now than we used to. And that doesn't just include the physical toxins, but also like electromagnetic toxicity, right? Things like, Wi-Fi and cell phone radiation, not that they're accumulating in the body, but they're adding to the body's stress burden, which is taking away energy that the body would otherwise use to deal with other toxic elements like heavy metals, like mercury. So it's this increased kind of toxic load from the outside. But then also, as the body becomes more stressed, and this could be with anything, mental stress, emotional stress, just anything that's making your body work harder than normal to stay balanced, it reduces the body's ability to detox because the body has a certain amount of energy that it can use for everything. Some of that goes to detox, right? Detox energy. But if the body is bogged down with emotional stress, or you're going through a hard time at work or in a relationship, that's actually taking away from your detox energy and can result in accumulation of heavy metals and other toxins. So when it comes to, chronic conditions, let's say chronic Lyme, generally with chronic Lyme, there's a lot going on, right? There's the microbial aspect, there's generally the toxicity aspect, there's all sorts of things. And let's say the chronic Lyme let's just say that was the primary driver of the dysfunction, but the body is focusing so much energy on that now the heavy metals and other toxins that are coming in on a daily basis from normal life, the body has a reduced ability to process. And the body says, we have to do something with these things. So the body tucks it into the natural storage, which is fat, right? So that could be general fat, it could be organs, et cetera. So sometimes it's not that the heavy metals and the toxins are the root cause of these conditions, but they might be the effect of the underlying condition, but then they become a contributing factor and it's still important to address them.
Right. Definitely. It's just like, with viruses, right? Like when the immune system isn't doing its job at stopping certain viruses that we all pretty much have in our body from replicating and coming out, we're going to see high levels. But then we can't say, like, oh, Lyme is really caused by Epstein-Barr and, things like that. It's more like, the heavy metals being present there, a correlation, like they're correlated with the infection. So tell us about zeolite. Tell us what it is, like as a compound, and then how does it work, like on a mechanistic sort of level to bind to and remove certain toxins from the body?
Yeah, so zeolite it's a mineral. It's a naturally occurring mineral mined from the earth, and it's got a negative charge, and it binds to positively charged toxic elements. And the first thing to distinguish is that zeolite is a classification of mineral. So in this conversation, when I say zeolite, I'm talking about the type of zeolite called clinoptilolite, because that's the form of zeolite that's safe for humans. That's the one that's been studied. That's the one that's in our product ZeoCharge. So it's not a synthetic zeolite. There are synthetic zeolites. There are nano zeolites. There are all these types of zeolites. They're kind of all grouped together in this category of zeolite, but that's not what I'm talking about here because they all act differently and they have different properties. I'm talking about powdered, cleaned, quality clinoptilolite zeolite. So what that is a natural mineral mined from the earth. It goes through a lot of manufacturing processes to get it to the point where it's safe and helpful for human consumption. But it's got this negative charge and it binds to positively charged elements. Now, what makes it a little bit unique compared to some other binders is that most binders just grab to everything. So you have, like the charcoals and the clays and a lot of things, they're more indiscriminate. They kind of mop things up. So really helpful in a lot of situations, but sometimes long term, they can cause issues because they're binding to not only the negative, but potentially also binding to some of the positive things that we don't want. And there's other issues associated with them in some individuals, such as constipation, dehydration, et cetera, where zeolite tends to not be constipating even at higher doses. And it's selective. So instead of grabbing everything, it works through this swap mechanism. So it's able to selectively bind toxic elements while leaving the essentials alone. Because in this cage, the zeolite is a cage, kind of like a honeycomb cage structure, and it has potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium inside, and it exchanges or swaps those for heavier elements that it encounters in the body. And the heavier elements are things like heavy metals. So they're more toxic and it swaps them for them, but it leaves the essential nutrients alone because it already has essential nutrients in its cage. So instead of just grabbing everything, it works through a swap mechanism where it binds the more toxic elements and leaves the essentials alone. So it can be taken for longer and at higher doses when people are tolerating it well.
Okay. So this is one of my very big pet peeves when it comes to binders. And I often have what can sometimes turn into an argument with other medical practitioners where like I really don't promote or even condone really the use of long-term duty binders like activated charcoal and bentonite clay and zeolite for a while because apparently I didn't understand the mechanism was on my list too. And so I want to make this point clear to the listeners, and I want to make sure that I am understanding this point. So, unlike those other binders, like for example, activated charcoal, it does not bind onto nutrients, it does not bind other minerals and things that we don't want it to bind. That's what you're saying?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
It's a swap mechanism. There's potential for minor binding. Like if you're
Hmm.
taking, let's say you're taking an iron supplement at the exact same time as the zeolite, there's possible for some binding because that's really a heavier metal. But in terms of most essential nutrients, it's not going to remove essential nutrients from the cell.
Okay.
If it does bind to something, it would only bind to things that you take at the same time that the body has not yet processed.
Yeah. And that makes sense.
Yeah, but even that, it's a much less effect than like a charcoal because it's still selective. So even most of those things, like it's not going to touch vitamins, it's not going to touch amino acids, it's not going to touch most minerals. There's just a few of the heavier minerals it might bind to if taken at the same time. But an interesting aspect of this is that even if that happens, usually you still get the absorption of that nutrient. So for example, and so here's an example. A lot of people actually they'll mix like colloidal silver or a nano silver in with the glass of ZeoCharge, right? You mix it with water, you put the silver in. It's going to bind to the silver because it's a metal, but they're doing that they're using the zeolite as a delivery system for the silver. So basically you have this silver and the zeolite. Now the zeolite goes in your body. The silver is lighter than the other toxic metals. So it then swaps the silver out at the binding site for the heavy metal. So they're trying to use it as a delivery system.
That's
So
interesting.
even let's say you took zinc at the exact same time as the ZeoCharge, and some people do this as well, same mechanism. Let's say it binds to some of it, maybe not all of it, but it binds to a little bit of the zinc because you mixed, liquid zinc in with the ZeoCharge.
Hmm.
And then that goes in the system. A lot of that zinc is still going to be swapped out unless you don't encounter any toxicity in the body. So it's not ideal to do that because some of the zinc might stay trapped in the zeolite and just pass out through the system, but some of it still will be absorbed. So we haven't seen any really, I don't have any concerns with nutrient depletion. I personally take it at the same time as minerals and all sorts of stuff. Don't have any issues. In the animal research, it's always mixed with food and it still improves the nutrient levels in the blood,
That's
right?
great.
So it's not necessarily because it's providing the nutrients, but by removing heavy metals and toxins that are, competing for space or, removing sources of oxidative stress, the body doesn't have to use up its vitamin, antioxidant resources as much, et cetera. So we have a case studies program as well. We did because we wanted to address some of these issues with zeolite before launching. So before we launched, we did a 6-month case studies program to see, is it going to deplete nutrients? Is it going to, cause aluminum toxicity? Does it work, et cetera? And we were able to kind of ease everyone's mind with all those issues. And in most people, it greatly enhanced nutrient status, which was actually quite surprising. Just by, reducing sources of oxidative stress and binding to heavy metals. So
Right.
yeah, it is different in that way from charcoal and other binders. And I would agree that most binders are not designed to be used long-term. They're for short-term acute situations where they can be very helpful, but long-term they can start being detrimental to your health. Whereas ZeoCharge, if tolerated well, can be taken longer term without issues. And for example, I take 60 grams a day, every single day, and I've done that for years. And I have zero concerns at all with any nutrient depletion or issues.
Awesome. Okay. So, talk to me about its ability beyond heavy metals. So, can it, first of all, bind LPS and help to either deal with a herx or prevent a herx? And then, can it also bind mycotoxins? And if so, which ones? Are you ready to revolutionize your approach to diagnosing and healing complex chronic inflammatory illnesses in both adults and children? The Lyme Symposium is your gateway to cutting-edge education, groundbreaking research, and innovative therapeutic solutions. Join us at Lyme Symposium. at the Fort Lauderdale Marriott, Pompano Beach Resort and Spa. Lyme Bites is the premier functional medicine conference on complex chronic infection-driven inflammatory illnesses. This year's meeting is jam-packed with leading industry experts discussing long COVID, mycotoxin illness, pandas, as well as Lyme and other vector-borne diseases. This conference will arm you with the knowledge, clinical pearls, and practical solutions that you can implement immediately into your practice Monday morning that will literally change your patients' lives and get them on their path to true healing. So join us at Pompano Beach or virtually from anywhere. Register now at lymebites.com. That's LYMEBYTES.com.
Yep, absolutely. So it binds to a number of things. It has been shown to bind to mycotoxins, specifically ochratoxin, aflatoxins, and ochratoxin A, and probably more, but most of that research is in animals, and they're only studying a couple different mycotoxins. There's a little bit of additional research for some additional mycotoxins, but it likely binds to a pretty wide range of them based on its structure. It does bind to lipopolysaccharides as well, endotoxin, so that's helpful. It binds to metabolic waste products like ammonia. And ammonia is huge because not only do we produce a lot of ammonia and we can get a buildup of ammonia if our livers aren't working properly, but the microbes, when we have the microbial imbalance, those are ammonia producing factories as well. So we end up with a lot of ammonia in the gut, highly toxic. And that's also providing an alkaline environment for candida and the microbes to thrive. So by binding to the ammonia, that alone, I think, is honestly one of the most beneficial aspects of ZeoCharge, is its ability to effectively bind to ammonia. It also binds to other metabolic waste products like urea. It binds to nitrates. It binds to radioactive materials. So it's been used industrially to clean up water supplies with radioactive waste like cesium, strontium. So in the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, even, it was used to clean up cesium and strontium from the water supplies. So it binds to radioactive materials, mycotoxins, metabolic waste products, heavy metals. It's been shown to bind to BPA. It's been shown to bind to glyphosate. And a lot of these direct binding studies are in water because before zeolite was used for humans, and it's a relatively new supplement compared to the charcoals and the clays that have been around for a long time. Zeolite's only been pretty much this century is the first time it's been sold as a supplement. But before that, it was used in industry for water filtration. And then it was used in animals to remove mycotoxins from the animal feed and to help with ammonia and animal health. Even in chickens, in chickens, it's been shown to increase glutathione peroxidase, superoxide dismutase, bind to LPS in chickens, and do all sorts of stuff. So it's been used on farms and in animals a lot longer than humans. And then more recently, it's been started to be studied for humans. But yeah, pretty broad spectrum binding capacity. The environmental toxicants, the heavy metals, BPA, the mycotoxins, the metabolic waste products, the radioactive materials.
That's great. So why do you think it is that some people are too sick to detox?
Yep. So when I would say I kind of disagree with the statement in general. I agree with the statement, but I think there's different ways to detox, right? So inherently, detox is going to add stress to the system, right? So when you think of a traditional detox, you're taking a toxic element from tissue and you're mobilizing it and you're bringing it into the body's processing center. And then the body has to deal with that. If your body was at max capacity in the processing center, let's say that cup was full, and now you've added more toxicity through a traditional detox agent, now your cup has overflowed and you're getting symptoms. And these detox reactions are signs from the body that there's more active, processed circulating toxicity than what your body is comfortable with dealing with. So that is what the detox reaction is telling you. So in those individuals that are kind of at max capacity, especially people with, that chronic Lyme, I kind of put it in a spectrum. I call it the 4M spectrum: mold, metal, magnetic field, and microbes. So generally when you have Lyme, you also have the other issues, and sometimes you become more sensitive to mental, emotional issues too. So that's a 5th M. But when you have this cup that is full, then adding more to the cup is generally not a good idea because you're going to feel terrible. And that's when you can trigger redistribution of the toxic elements because you're not effective at clearing them. You're going to activate a strong immune response that can result in, mast cell activation syndrome, excess histamine load, all these problems. So while people think, I need to power through this because I need a detox, it might be doing more harm than good because you're putting your body kind of in a weakened state. Ideally, in those so that's too sick to detox. So I do agree with that completely. But with ZeoCharge, it's actually the opposite approach, because instead of going in and trying to stimulate detox, it's not directly pulling from an organ or trying to, get the it's binding to what's in the processing center. So that's in the GI tract. It's binding to the metabolic waste. It's binding to all this stuff. It's reducing the cup load, right? So it's lowering the level of toxicity in the cup instead of adding to it. And that's where the dosing, which we can talk about, comes into play, because the more you take, the more toxicity you remove from the cup, and the better you generally feel. So
Right.
it's the opposite approach. So with most detoxes, yes, it adds stress. You can be too sick to detox, but those individuals that have tried all the other detoxes and haven't been able to do it, most of them can actually take ZeoCharge and feel better on it and not have the detox reactions, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's so important because people talk about like cellular drainage and detox, again, like pulling from the cell. And it's like, to your point, if we don't have the routes of elimination open and we're not supporting them and we're not, making sure that our patients are pooping, peeing, breathing, sweating, right? All of the routes of elimination for toxins before we start to mobilize toxins, we're just going to make them toxic. So I have this visual that I often use where it's like, routes of elimination open and then lymphatic drainage and working on healing the gut. And then phase one, phase two of the liver. And then way, way upstream is like where we actually are trying to encourage things to come out of the cells. But it's like, we don't want to pull anything out of the cell until we make sure like all of those other steps are open and that the toxins actually have a way to get out of the body instead of just being recirculated, causing more oxidative stress, cellular damage, mitochondrial damage, etc. Hi, I'm Dr. Mariah Hinchy, and if you've followed my work for a while, you've heard me talk about the importance of binders when we're helping the body deal with an increased toxic burden, especially in people dealing with chronic infections, mold exposure, or other complex inflammatory illnesses. You've also heard me say that I'm generally cautious with many traditional binders like activated charcoal or bentonite clay. These binders can be useful in a short term or acute situation, but because they bind so broadly, they can also pull out beneficial minerals and nutrients, which isn't something we want happening long term in patients who are already so depleted. This is why I found the conversation that I had with Jeff Hoyt so interesting when we talked about ZeoCharge. ZeoCharge uses clinoptilolite zeolite, which is a naturally occurring mineral formed from volcanic ash. What makes this zeolite so unique is its microporous crystalline lattice. It's essentially a three-dimensional cage made of silicone, aluminum, and oxygen atoms. Those microscopic cages carry a negative charge, which allows them to attract and bind to positively charged toxic elements. This includes things like heavy metals, ammonia, and certain environmental toxins that can accumulate from our daily exposures through food, water, air, and even our own metabolic waste produced inside of our bodies. Because of the structure of that mineral lattice, zeolite tends to preferentially bind toxic, positively charged compounds only rather than our essential nutrients. And that's why it's often referred to as the smart binder. So remember, the goal of detoxification is not aggressive detoxification. The goal is to help calm the toxic storm in an overworked system by gently reducing the toxic burden and supporting the body's natural elimination pathways. So if you'd like to learn more, you can visit zeolitelabs.com/zeolite discount. That's ZeoLiteLabs.com, or you can listen to my conversation with Jeff on this topic on the Lyme Bites podcast.
Yeah, no, it's 100% correct. And the way I look at it, I always like to step back and say, why is the body doing what it's doing? And the body slows down detox when you're sick to protect you. So I always like to say, let's work with the body's natural processes opposed to fighting against the body's natural processes, because we're not going to win that fight and we're going to feel terrible. A lot of detox approaches are trying to force things. They're forcing detox. They're fighting against what the body wants to do. We have to understand that the body is more focused on short-term survival than long-term thrival. So the body would actually prefer to keep a toxic element, let's say mercury, in your brain, even though it's might be causing neurodegeneration, just causing issues. It would prefer to keep it there opposed to having it floating around and actively being detoxed, because when it's hiding in the brain, it's hidden from the cleanup crews of the body to a large extent. So it's not being attacked by the immune system. It's not being cleaned up. It's in storage, right?
Right.
So when it's released, now the body has to deal with it, and you get the strong immune response and all these other issues. So it's very interesting. But I like to look at it. Okay, the body's doing, what it's doing for a reason. So when someone is sick, a lot of times their natural lymph flow slows down, their bile production slows down, they stop sweating. Their natural detox, they might get constipated because of slow bile flow or whatever it is. Their body slows down detox because it wants to keep the toxic elements in storage because it's too stressful to get them out of the system right now. So when someone starts getting healthier, naturally all of their detox functions start improving. So it's very interesting. So like just on ZeoCharge or whatever it is. So I tell people the best way to detox is to get healthy, right? Whatever that is for you. So the healthier you are, the faster you detox, the more complex your issue is and the sicker you become, the slower you detox because your body's in survival mode and is keeping stuff in tissue. So some people just taking ZeoCharge, all of a sudden, they get this lymph drainage, they get more bioflow, they start sweating, etc. And it just depends, it's unclogging the detox machinery and the body has more energy to do what it wants to do.
And so, is there any constipation effects from doing the zeolite?
Could be. It depends. So I'd say about 80% of the time, it has more of a normalizing effect on stools. And one of the number one reasons people continue on it is because it does stabilize and normalize your stools. Where a lot of these people have taken, other binders, they can't take them because they're too constipating. They take
Right.
ZeoCharge, it has more of a laxative effect. Now, it all depends on the person. So generally, when you're taking ZeoCharge, if you get constipated, it's generally not the powder itself, it's the detox reaction. Right. And that's another note with ZeoCharge. There are no side effects. There are only detox reactions because zeolite is not working on any specific biochemical pathway. It's not directly doing anything. It's just binding. And then that binding process can result in all sorts of different reactions depending on the body's response to, what was released, immobilized, et cetera.
So, briefly go through that. What should patients be on the lookout for as a potential detox reaction?
Yep. So different people are prone to different reactions, but the number one is always going to be a headache. So a headache is the number one detox reaction. You could have increased irritability. You could have joint pain. It could be some sort of digestive thing. Now, and there's different types of detox reactions, and this is important too, because not all detox reactions are bad, right? The detox reactions we want to avoid are going to be the redistribution of toxic elements. So that's from an inefficient detox. You've got more circulating toxicity than what the body wants to handle. And then there could be, it's just staying around too long. And then the body, has a strong immune response. Some of it goes back to tissue, et cetera. Not ideal. When we talk about Herxheimer reactions, those are going to be microbial die-off reactions. So we're responding to the LPS and some of the waste products produced as the microbes are dying off. That is different because you're not getting a redistribution effect. You're just getting a strong immune response due to the Herx. It's ideal to avoid all reactions, but that one is better than the detox reactions because you're not really getting the redistribution issue. Sometimes you might have an initial purging event where you have, diarrhea or even vomiting starting off. That's not necessarily a bad detox reaction. It's just that your body is quickly trying to expel something. And then you have, retracement type symptoms, or maybe you start having memory, maybe you start dreaming, or you start old memories or emotions start coming to the surface because the body stores emotions just like it stores toxicants and heavy metals and other things. So sometimes these emotions start coming to the surface, and those you can't really bind to those, right? So it's not that sometimes you can't really negate those completely. So those are interesting reactions as well. So there's all sorts of stuff that can come to the surface, but there's a lot of reactions that you can experience. Constipation is one, diarrhea is one. It just depends on the response. Diarrhea is a much better detox reaction than constipation
Yeah,
because
for
you're
sure.
getting stuff out. You
Right.
don't want to be constipated long term. And that's really the one situation where some people, have to take more breaks and, kind of go off of ZeoCharge if it's causing constipation. Sometimes what will happen is someone takes like a half scoop
Hmm.
and they get constipated, but then they take 4 scoops or 5 scoops and they actually are not constipated and maybe even it's more laxative. And that means the low dose was an inefficient detox, kind of stirred stuff up and it caused an inflammatory response because it was an inefficient detox. Where they took the higher dose, it was an efficient detox and it didn't cause constipation because it just worked better. Now,
Right.
in that situation, you can continue taking it at the higher dose. If you're getting constipated and you keep raising the dose and you're getting more constipated, then it might actually be the powder itself causing the constipation, in which case you don't want to keep raising the dose. You probably want to, and we haven't even, people are probably confused because we haven't talked about the dosing paradox yet, which we can
Right.
get into.
We'll
But
get there.
in that case, we want to lower the dose or maybe take breaks because you don't want to be constipated when you're
Right.
detoxing. Sometimes it's cyclical. Some things when you detox are more constipating than others. So sometimes someone will have looser stools for a few weeks, constipated for a week, and then it cycles. And that, I think that depends on kind of what the body is processing, because the body will detox what it wants when it wants. That's the nice thing about ZeoCharge is this, it binds to a lot of things, but it can detox more than what it binds to. Because whatever it's binding to in the GI tract is just reducing the total stress load, increasing the body's detox energy. And then the body says, there's now room in this cup to dump more stuff. Let's remove, gadolinium from the brain. Let's remove some of these other toxic elements that have been tucked in tissue, and it just removes what it wants when it wants. And the body goes through cycles where it'll detox. It doesn't necessarily detox everything at once. The body will dump certain things. So with my studies with the Oligoscan tissue metal, heavy metal analysis, a lot of times it'll group metals together like mercury, aluminum, lead, and gadolinium. Those four will start coming out, and the other 11 metals will not. And then the next month it's inverted, where those metals are not moving and the other 11 are. And then it cycles back and forth. So the body kind of goes through cycles, and it's not necessarily about the direct binding affinity of ZeoCharge to those things. It's about the body's letting go of what it wants to let go of when you want to let go. And that could also result in different detox symptoms that are unexplained, because you're saying, why do all of a sudden I feel terrible? What did I do different? It's not that you did anything different. It's that your body just let go of something else, and now it's stressful on the way out. Because
Right.
if a metal is leaving, let's say mercury is leaving your brain and now you're excreting it, it's the same as if you were just exposed to the mercury. It's back in the body's processing center, right? It can be just as stressful. And that's why detox is a process, because your body will only let go of small amounts of toxicity at a time to prevent you from dying. And the healthier you are, the more your body will let go of. But it's not an overnight thing, because the body slowly lets go of things at the pace that you can handle it.
Right. And I know that the answer to this question is going to be different depending on what substance we're talking about, as well as the detoxification capacity of the individual, as well as what their toxic load is and whatnot. But on average, if you are doing like a heavy metal detoxification protocol with somebody, how many weeks or months or years are we looking at to deal with, the average load of, like, let's say, letter mercury? Are you suffering from Lyme disease or another complex chronic illness and aren't sure who to trust when it comes to herbal supplements? Hi, I'm Dr. Mariah Hinchy, founder of Lyme Core Botanicals. As a naturopathic physician specializing in complex chronic infection driven illnesses like Lyme disease, I needed herbal medicine I could truly trust. That's why I formulated Lyme Core Botanicals, where our herbal tinctures are handcrafted in small batches right here in Connecticut. We use the whole herb, never isolates, to preserve the full spectrum of medicinal compounds. Every single step from sourcing to extraction is done with precision to ensure maximum purity, potency, and consistency. These are the same herbal formulas I use to heal myself and have used for years to help my patients and family members heal too. And now I'm making them available to practitioners and patients everywhere. Lyme Core Botanicals, herbal medicine you can trust from a doctor who lives this work. Learn more at Lyme Core Botanicals. That's LYMECORE.com.
So a lot of factors. One, it depends on how much you have. It depends on how long it's been there. It depends on how comfortable your body is letting go. Because the key to detox is to get your body to detox for you. We cannot rely on ZeoCharge or any other supplement or protocol. We have to rely on our body to get this stuff out for long-term effectiveness. That's why these approaches where we're fighting against it and just trying to pull stuff out doesn't usually work. And we have to go on and off because it's so stressful, because it is a multi-year process. It doesn't necessarily need to be on the products multi-year, because if your body can get to the point where it continues detoxing on its own without the supplements, great. It just depends on the individual. So sometimes you just need a jump start where you take ZeoCharge for 5 months, for 6 months, and it jump starts stuff, but then you stop taking it and your body continues dumping the toxic elements because now you've freed up so much energy It all depends on if you're still dealing with a lot of other chronic issues. So if your
Right.
cup fills back up when you stop taking the ZeoCharge, your body's probably going to stop detoxing because there's no room to receive it. If your
Right.
cup is permanently emptied, then your body will continue detoxing because it has room to detox. So it could be a 6 month journey, it could be 2 years, it could be ongoing. It depends on your current level of toxic exposure. It depends on your willingness to detox, your body's willingness to detox. And an interesting point is a lot of people say, I'm eating all organic, I'm doing everything right now. Why do I still have signs of toxicity? And it's not all about what you're doing right now. It's about the accumulation of events that have occurred in your life. Because the body has memory, the body stores toxic elements and a lot of other things. And it's, you have, not only do you have the external source of toxicity, which is what everyone talks about, food, water, air, personal care products, etc. You have the internal source of toxicity, which is actually much higher level than the external sources. So the internal toxicity is going to be your metabolic waste products, all these toxins that your body's producing daily, the toxicity that the microbes in your body are producing daily, and then the recycled toxicity. And this is a big one because let's say you were exposed to, lead and mercury, and a lot of that has ended up being stored in your liver. And now every time your body releases bile, it's releasing or it's carrying some of the lead and mercury in the bile that goes to the small intestine. The body then recycles most of its bile, up to 95%. That goes back to the liver, right? Enterohepatic for circulation, gut, liver, circulation. So it goes from the liver to the small intestine, back to the liver, and you're recycling lead and mercury with the bile. So a lot of times people go in a sauna, they do something, exercise, eat a fatty meal, something to stimulate bile. They feel absolutely awful. And a lot of times that's because the bile is toxic, because the liver is toxic. And in that situation, you're basically poisoning yourself with your own toxicity every single day, right? So you want to clean the bile, you want to clean the liver. So then as you're releasing the bile, you're not poisoning yourself. So it's not necessarily the external source of toxicity that's making you sick. It might be something that has been in your body for a long time and your body just keeps moving it around and it can't get rid of it.
So, talk to us about the push catch versus the catch and release methods of detoxification.
Yeah. So, and there's a number of ways to do it, and it all depends on your level of health. The healthier you are, the more liberty you have to detox with different methods, right? Because there's just more of you have a higher level of a higher stress threshold. So, push catch is going to be, well, first you just have push protocols, which are just, it could be a homeopathic agent, it could be, herbs, it could be chelation's more of a pull method, but it's something to try to get a toxic element out of tissue and add it to your gut, basically, in your bloodstream for removal. And then some of those protocols add the catch feature where they do that. So let's say they do like homeopathic remedy, and then they take a binder 30 to 60 minutes later to try to catch some of that toxicity. So the idea is you take the push agent, the detox agent, it's adding stress to your system, which is why they then take the binder to try to mitigate the stress. So that can work. The problem is you've already stressed out your system with the push. So you've already activated the immune response and potentially caused a lot of issues. There's only so much of the stress you can mitigate. So one of the other approaches I think is probably better than that, if you're going to do that, is catch, push. So take the binder first, then do the push agent later, because now you've freed up some room for things to be received in the processing center. So what I think for sensitive individuals is better, especially to start with, is just catch, no pushing, right? So I call it catch and release, where you take ZeoCharge and you're just catching the toxicity that's currently there. And if you're symptomatic, generally there's a lot going on there. You bind to that, and now you've emptied the cup, or you've lowered the toxic burden in the cup, and now your body says, I'm going to release more toxicity at my own pace. So you catch and the body releases. So it's working with the body's natural process.
Sounds way more not effective. It sounds way more safe, I guess, is a
Yeah.
better word.
So let's talk about the toxic bile with this situation. If you have toxic liver and toxic bile, toxic liver, and you take a push agent, so you take the bitter herbs, which are stimulating the body to produce a greater level of bile. That means you're releasing now more of the lead and mercury and whatever else is in the bile. You're poisoning yourself to a greater extent. If your body's not able to excrete that, it just recirculates.
Mhm.
So now you've just poisoned yourself even more. And now maybe the lead and mercury end up going somewhere else in the body.
Right.
Or it's just a constant immune reaction at the best, which is not ideal. So if you're just catching it first, let's say, because you're already getting this biorelease every day. So maybe after, if you have a toxic liver, maybe what you want to do is you eat a meal, your largest meal of the day, 30 minutes later, take ZeoCharge. You basically are filtering the bile, right? You're binding to lead and mercury and some of the toxic elements in the bile so it doesn't recirculate. So that alone is going to be potentially the best method to clean your liver, opposed to trying to push things out and then catch them, right? If you are very healthy and you want to accelerate the process, yes, you could probably push it because your body's able to excrete and get rid of what was pushed out. But if you're at max capacity, the more you push, the more it's not going to be leaving because your body can't deal with it. So the catch method is going to be much more effective for you.
Right. So I know you want to talk about the dosing paradox with the zeolite. And does the dosing paradox fit into this as well? I would imagine it does.
Yes. Yeah. So what the two most important things with zeolite are quality and quantity. You want to get
Mhm.
the right product and you want to take it at the right dose, right? So most people, especially probably a lot of your listeners, are in the camp where we're going to start low and slow. We're going to titrate up, right? Which is a great idea with pretty much everything, because you want to test the waters with a lot of things. You want to test the waters. You don't want to have strong reactions. Now, with some things, it backfires because things are designed to be taken at certain doses. I mean, even medications. If you microdose certain medications, it's going to have the opposite effect.
I strongly, and people are probably sick of hearing me say, I believe in therapeutic doses. I don't believe in, we're on the same page.
Okay. And interestingly, the reason I discovered this zeolite dosing paradox is because my previous work before zeolite was working with, I was doing a lot of like polysaccharide extracts and
Yep.
various compounds for immune regulation. And it was all about therapeutic doses, because the therapeutic dose for a lot of people was basically a megadose of these things. And I mean, just for as an example, 10 years ago, I had a bumper, not a bumper, like a magnet on my car that said
Mhm.
megadose nutraceuticals. And this is in like Iowa. I didn't get any calls from that, but that was not an effective outreach program. But I was into this therapeutic dosing, which a lot of people were calling megadosing. So that's what I brought that kind of background into the zeolite. And that's how I discovered the paradox, where people were basically taking these microdoses of zeolite, whether it was a liquid product or a nano product or just a powder, and they were just mixing a glass with powder, a scoop in water, taking a sip, and they were getting terrible reactions. And then other people were just taking the full scoop or 2 scoops or whatever, and they were not getting reactions. And I said, what's going on here? So I started experimenting. I had the people that were having the reactions to the one sip, I had them take the full scoop, and they no longer got the reactions. I mean, some of them didn't do it, but the people who did do it were not getting the reaction. So I said, okay, there's a paradox. And then I developed kind of my thoughts and theories behind that, which can be found on zeolitelabs.com under the education tab. There's like a 40-page document that goes over my thoughts. But there's a lot of, essentially, in a
Only
nutshell,
40 pages.
it's, and that was from like years ago. I could probably update it with a lot more now too. But essentially what happens is when you take a tiny dose of zeolite, it goes in and it does what it does, which is bind, and it stirs things up. It kind of makes a mess. But
Yep.
all of the zeolite cages are bound. And now you have this mess that was made, and that could be through biofilm disruption or some other mechanism where you've added toxicity to your bucket.
Right.
Your body
You
now
don't have
has to,
enough to pull it out.
exactly. So your body now has to clean up the mess. So the net effect was actually an addition of stress on your body,
Right.
which is the opposite purpose of a binder,
Right.
which is to reduce stress. Now, let's say you took a higher dose. So the theory is that 10 milligrams of zeolite is more likely to cause a detox reaction than 10,000 milligrams, right? So the much higher dose. So let's say you took the 10 milligrams, you got a headache. 10,000 milligrams, you didn't get a headache. That's because it goes in, stirs things up, makes a mess, but now you have extra zeolite cages to clean up the mess that it made. You have extra binding capacity. So the net effect is a reduction of stress. So let's say you have your processing center cup example. I don't know if this is a terrible example or not, but you've got your cup, right? That's your level of toxicity, your threshold. Let's say you're at 80%. And let's say you're at 95%. 101% is symptoms, right? 100% is
When the
baseline.
cup is overflowing, that's the symptoms. I use
Yes.
the bucket analogy all
Okay.
the time. So
Perfect.
again, we're on the same page.
Okay. Excellent. So this is new. I usually don't use this example, but I'm taking it for a test ride. So you
Okay.
have this bucket or cup. When it's overflowing, you have symptoms. Great. Okay.
Right.
So let's say you're at 95 out of 100, 95% full. You take the ZeoCharge and it reduces it to 90%. You took a little bit, it bound to 5%. But then your body starts dumping toxicity in response to the detox, or you disrupt the biofilms and all this stuff pours into the bucket. Now you're at 120%. Now you have symptoms, right? Now let's say you took 5 scoops of ZeoCharge, right? Way more than you took the first time. You went from 90, now you're at 95% baseline in your cup. Now you go down to 30% because you took so much. Now your body dumps, 50 units of toxicity. You're still only at 80%. You don't have the symptoms. So the more you take, the less likely you are to have the symptoms because you're removing more from your cup initially. And then the body, as it adds its own stress from the detox, there's room to receive it.
Right.
So that's where there's a lot of issues. So a lot of people, when they take zeolite products and a lot of detox products, they get terrible reactions and they say, oh, this is fantastic. This means the product is working. But in reality, it's a sign that it's not ideal. It's an inefficient detox. Now, sometimes detox reactions are unavoidable. I'm not going to argue with that. And there's the different types, which we kind of discussed. But if you can detox without the reactions, that's not only better, you're detoxing faster and more efficiently. So a lot of people, they want that kind of placebo effect where they get these reactions, they think it's working. But if you take, and we did a sip challenge as well, where we kind of simulated this, you took a sip, some people got symptoms, they took the scoop the next day, no symptoms, right? The sip was not providing a better detox just because they got symptoms. It was less efficient. So a lot of people, they take these nano zeolites or liquid zeolites or other products that are less efficient and they get terrible symptoms and they say, oh, this is really powerful. It's too powerful for me. But it's just not an efficient detox. Where ZeoCharge, like, oh, ZeoCharge didn't work as well because I didn't get the symptoms. Well, no, it worked much better.
Right. Right. No, and I mean, the symptoms are really symptoms of inflammation. And I mean, inflammation really isn't ideal, definitely not helpful to the body in really any situation other than an acute injury or infection. So, walk us through how you see zeolite fitting into a Lyme protocol.
Yeah. So it can be used so in a Lyme protocol, zeolite in general can be used in a number of ways. It can be used as a standalone kind of catch agent to reduce the stress on the body. It can be used in combination with other herbs and things to mitigate the stress of those. So if you're doing an antimicrobial protocol and you're causing some LPS and other issues, you're causing some microbial die-off, you might want to take the ZeoCharge after those herbs or that protocol to bind to some of that the metabolic waste and the microbial waste products. It can be used in that way. It can be used kind of aside from your other Lyme protocol supplements just to try to calm things down in the interim. So there's different ways to do it. I like starting off, I like having people take it after a meal to bind to the toxic bile. Because I think that just preventing the recirculation of the toxic bile is kind of a foundational step. And when you take it after a meal, you're also less likely to get the detox reactions. Because if you take it first thing in the morning, it has a pretty strong anti-biofilm effect as well. So a lot of people will take it first thing in the morning. It'll disrupt all these biofilms and you get nauseous, you get all these symptoms, right? So trying to avoiding that to start with is probably ideal unless you're using it for that purpose.
Right.
But I like taking it after a meal. So it could be taken with a meal as well. That's another one of the advantages of it over the other binders that have to be separated because it's not binding to the nutrients in food. And like in the animal studies, it's increasing the absorption of the nutrients. So yeah,
So
it's
you
very
will still
versatile.
get just as strong of a binding effect, even if you're taking it with your food.
It's going to bind to whatever your body is processing at that time. So if you take it with a meal, your body's going to have more metabolic waste products present because the stress of digestion. It's going to potentially have some of the toxic elements that were in the food. If you take it on an empty stomach, it's going to be binding to whatever your body is currently working on at that time. Maybe it's mycotoxins. So I like to tell people to take it when they're most symptomatic because when they're most symptomatic, that's likely when they have the most active toxicity present. And that's when you want to bind it the most.
Okay. And then going back to you saying take it after a meal, do you mean as soon as you're done with a meal, 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later? What's the sweet spot for you?
Usually about 30, maybe 30 to 45, about 30 after I like. But honestly, taking it with the meal or even before, it's still going to be in the GI tract. So the goal is to bind to some of the bile and other things in response to the meal. But even if you take it before a meal, it's going to be in the small intestine still after when the bile is being dumped. So either way is fine. I personally take it 30 minutes after dinner.
Mhm.
That's what I like to do. But it can be, people have taken it all different times of the day before bed when they wake up with
Yep.
various meals, all times, and we haven't seen too big of a difference in effectiveness.
Okay. So, as far as main parts of a Lyme protocol, so it can bind to LPS and decrease the severity or even likelihood of a Herxheimer reaction. It can help to break down biofilms. It can help to bind the heavy metals that the biofilm or the body in general can be holding on to when there's these vector borne diseases. What other roles or bases would it cover when it comes to treating Lyme specifically?
Yeah. So, I mean, really, it's just trying to remove the opportunity, right? The opportunistic nature of Lyme and the co-infections. A lot of times it's deep in a toxic terrain and environment. So by binding to those things and just calming down the environment, and I like to say it calms the storm in the body, because if your body's in a constant immunoreactive state as well, it's going to be, you have that inflammation, you have that mast cell, you have a lot of issues. So if you can calm that down, then the body's going to be in a better position to naturally start going after the Lyme and co-infections, opposed to focusing all of its energy on all this other stuff going on. Right. So just the general binding effect. Usually people take it to bind to a specific thing, but I think it's really more about that it binds to something, and whatever it binds to, that's reducing stress on the body. That gives the body more energy to naturally start going after things. And back to the ammonia. I mean, a lot of these microbes do produce a lot of ammonia. The ammonia then provides the environment for the microbes to thrive, like Candida, right?
Right.
Candida prefers the alkaline environment. Ammonia is alkaline. It releases ammonia along with, tons of other things, but just binding to that and the aldehydes and some of the other things maybe it's binding to is inhibiting the growth of the Candida, because it's removing the terrain. But also, like, Candida a lot of times is there because of mercury or
Right.
toxic elements, right? A lot of these microbes, they're not our enemy. They're doing what they're designed to do,
Right.
and they're just in a sick environment. They're trying to kind of decompose you prematurely, and some, and it's like a yeast infection. I mean, that's kind of how I see it. So a lot of people, when they take ZeoCharge, sometimes they actually will have developed some sort of Candida issue, which was already there, but by binding to the
Right.
mercury, they've then released the Candida. And
Yeah.
now your body, that's another one of those detox reactions, might not be avoidable because you've bound to the mercury, but then your body is now attacking the Candida that was kind of maybe protected in a biofilm or just kind of hidden. And then you get that immune response. Right now, it binds to some of the byproducts of the Candida, but maybe not 100% of them, and you still get that immune response. So just because I'm talking about the dosing and this gentle nature of it doesn't mean that's going to happen for you. It's 100% dependent on the response of the individual, and there's really, unfortunately, no way to know how each person's going to respond to it. A lot of people feel better on it. A lot of people feel worse. Ideally, from a detox perspective, when you detox, you either want to feel nothing or you want to feel better,
Right.
right? You don't want to feel worse. But especially when there's a lot of microbes present, sometimes you don't feel better right away because you're getting so much of the biofilm disruption, and maybe potentially initial purging event, et cetera. So kind of tricky. But yeah, just cleaning up the environment for Lyme is a big one, binding to the ammonia, to some of these other things, and then just letting the body kind of naturally start doing what it does best.
Great. So, if our listeners want to hear more from you, I know you have your podcast. Tell us a little bit more about that, and then tell us the website where our listeners can find the zeolite product and anything else that you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. So the website is the best overall source of information. It's zeolitelabs.com, and the product is ZeoCharge. And there's an education page with a lot of videos, a lot of educational resources. There's all sorts of information on the dosing, the zeolite dosing paradox, if you want to nerd out on that. And then there's also a link to our podcast on that page, which is the Detox Experience, or the detoxexperience.com. And essentially what that is, it's just a ZeoCharge user experience podcast. So have interviewed a number of the people who have taken ZeoCharge for a while, and they just share their experience. And did they experience detox reactions? Did they not? What doses did they try, et cetera? And there's some pretty interesting stories. Just, some people taking like 80, 90 grams of this stuff a day type of thing, mega doses just to stabilize, and then working down. And that is one thing I should probably address. What dose should people start on? So with and chronic conditions generally, the dosing is even more important for those individuals than the average person. So the maintenance dose is 1 scoop per day, or kind of the healthy person dose. The detox dose is going to be between 2 and 6 scoops per day. And that's a range, but it's just because it just depends on so many factors, and we don't know how each person's going to respond. So for most people, especially like probably the Lyme individuals and people listening to this podcast, are going to be 2 scoops is generally a good starting dose because that gives you room to maneuver. So say you take 2 scoops and you get a headache, the next day go to 4 scoops. And if you still have a headache, go to 6 scoops the next day, right? So
And
what
are
you,
you recommending this in divided doses or just all at once?
yeah, great question. All at once, because the key is to get enough zeolite per dose, not cumulatively. So
Right,
if you took a half of a scoop 5 times a day, the half scoop's probably going to be a stressful reaction and you're going to stress out your system 5 different times.
right.
Whereas if you took 2.5 scoops, all, all half scoops, all of it at once,
Yeah,
it might not cause any reaction. And if it does cause a minor reaction, your body has 24 hours to recover.
right.
So all
But
at
I mean,
once.
would it be better to take, for example, if 4 scoops is like your sort of magical dose, like would it be better to take 4 scoops every 12 hours so that you're kind of keeping up with it?
It could be. And the theories, like the logic from every other company, basically they say to take it every, 3 times a day
Yeah.
because so you constantly have it in your system. We have not seen that to work well,
Okay.
mostly because people are taking too low of a dose each time and
Right.
it ends up being counterproductive. But yes, in theory, if 4 scoops is your perfect dose and that you're feeling great on it, doing 4 scoops twice per day might be better. But it just depends. When it comes to detox, there's max detox where your body's not going to detox faster than it wants in
Yep.
terms of what it's releasing. So a lot of times you double the dose or you add that second dose, you don't detox any faster.
Right.
If you're feeling better on the second dose, because some people feel the ZeoCharge wears off after a while, if you then add another dose and you feel better again, I'm totally fine with that. You just don't want to go 2 scoops twice a day if you need 4 scoops all at once.
Right.
So I would
Yes.
start with the 1 dose and then experiment from there if you want to split the dose, especially on the Lyme protocol. If you're taking herbs twice a day that are causing some die off, then it's probably at that point best to actually split the dose because you want to mitigate that stress as much as possible. So,
Yeah. And I mean, the dosing for almost all Lyme herbs is 3 times a day due to their half life and the concentration you want to keep them at.
yeah. So in that situation, it might be better to do, let's say, 1 scoop or 2 scoops after each, 30 minutes after each of the Lyme supplements,
Hmm.
just to try to mitigate that as much as possible. Because it's a little bit different than taking it on its own, because you're already
Right.
stressing out the system with those. So you might as well, even a little bit is going to reduce the stress because you've already kind of stirred up the bucket with the Lyme stuff. You've already potentially just,
Yeah. I
it
mean,
depends.
it depends on the practitioner, but I mean, when I'm putting people on herbs, the herbs that they're taking are also decreasing inflammation.
Okay.
And I mean, they're doing a lot of protective, calming things. We're not just, I mean, believe me, we don't just focus on killing.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
So, another question. So, is there any toxic dose? Are there any negative side effects besides obviously like constipation or diarrhea or any of the detox reactions where like we're really pushing inflammation? So, like those things aside, is there any toxicity? Is there any negative reaction or negative side to taking this?
Yeah. So the negative reaction would just be whatever your body is poisoning yourself with
Hmm.
as it's stirred up from the response. Because ZeoCharge is inert in itself, it's biologically inert. It's not doing anything. It's not accumulating in the body. It's not causing an immune reaction in its own. It's just binding. And then as things are liberated and mobilized, that's the reaction. That's why there can be so many different symptoms that occur because it's all based on what was in your system. And if you had something in your system that you were exposed to 15 years ago and it's been hidden and you just remobilized it for the first time, you might have symptoms and you might feel the same way you did 15 years ago
Right.
as it starts coming out. So that's the main concern. In terms of toxic dose, really the toxic dose is the low dose because it's not about because it goes back to the reaction and the low dose is more likely to cause the reaction than the high dose, which is why I personally take what everyone else would consider a mega dose. I'm not recommending at this. I take 12 scoops a day, right? So 60 grams, and I do split it up now. So I do 6 in the morning, 6 in the evening, but I don't recommend that because it's unnecessary. But if you take more than you need, like I'm doing, you're basically just flushing.
Yeah.
You're wasting it. You have unused zeolite cages and you just poop it out.
Yeah.
So not a big deal, but it's just a waste of money.
Yeah.
I just get a really good deal.
I would imagine you do. I do the same thing when I'm going to take herbs. I like to overkill with myself. Anyways, all right. Any exciting news you want to share? Any events coming up? Anything that we can help you promote?
Yeah, well, so zeolitelabs.com, the detoxcoach.com are the 2 main sites. Instagram at Zeolite Labs is another source. And then for events, we are rolling out a technology line in the spring. So we're in March now. So probably in April to May, we're rolling out a whole tech line. So kind of my focus is EMF protection, water structuring, and cellular voltage tracing technology, because those are all things that are important to me. And I just wanted to make those available to other people as well. So actually, I've got one of those things right here. This is my new EMF structuring card. So you
Awesome.
put it on the source of radiation, so your cell phone, Wi-Fi router, and it
Yeah.
helps harmonize the field. It's not blocking, but it's making the field more coherent, more biologically friendly. So this just came in. I just had these manufactured, but we haven't done the research on it yet, which is why it's not released. So we have to prove that it works,
Right. Well, I'd
essentially.
love to have you come back on and talk about that and, for the podcast. And so let us know if you have any upcoming events that you'd like to share.
Absolutely. So we just launched our new tech line, and we're focusing on EMF structuring or EMF mitigation protection, water structuring, and cellular voltage raising technology. So those are things that are really important to me. I wanted to extend to others. So for EMF protection, it's kind of threefold. One, it's personal protection. So that's going to be biofield balancing. So things that are helping, strengthening your biofield against external sources. And then device level protection. That's where you put technology on specific devices you have control over, such as cell phones, Wi-Fi routers, smart meters. And this technology helps harmonize or change the field so it's more bio-friendly. It doesn't block it, but it makes the field more coherent, so it's less harmful on the body. And then the other level is going to be the room harmonization. So those are the three levels of EMF protection. And then we have the water structuring. So we're coming out with what we have now is the water. We call it the WOW pen, water optimization wand pen. So the WOW pen, and essentially you stir the water and it structures it. I like to say it's beyond structured water,
Yeah.
but we essentially, if your listeners aren't familiar with structured water, essentially the water in our cells and in our body is a little bit different than the water we're consuming from the tap, because the water from the tap is essentially, for lack of a better word, dead.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you microwave water, it is still water, but if you water a plant with that microwaved water, even after it's cooled down, you kill the plant. It's because you've zapped the energy from the water. It's unstructured. So we're basically bringing the life back to the water through magnetism, through some different things in the pen, and it's raising the energy potential of the water. So it's a little bit closer to the cellular water that we're consuming. And then we've got the cellular voltage raising technology, which is primarily our mat, the ZeoMat. It's a set. We've got the ZeoMat, the ZeoWrap, and the ZeoCap, but it's new technology, QRT, quantum resonance technology, in combination with PEMF, infrared, and natural mineral elements that I like to call them non-electronic energy field therapy,
Wow,
because you have,
very cool.
yeah, lots of stuff.
Yeah,
So
we'll have to have you come back on or at least come on the podcast and talk about all of these things because we could definitely go over all of these for another hour for sure.
absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here with me. It was so nice to meet you and talk with you today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I had a good time.
If this episode gave you an answer, brought you new insight, or made you think differently, subscribe to the Lyme Bites podcast and share with someone who's ready to take control of their healing journey. And if you can, please leave a review. It helps others to find the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.